What is the future for children like Matthew cut off from his society? Matthew, because of the gifts that have been given to his parents, because of the support that he's received, is lucky in some ways. But what about the thousands of other children whose families have been resettled in the United States? The very small numbers, maybe 12,000 last year, maybe 17,000 this year, who've been resettled in the United States. What about the thousands of people in Boston, in Detroit, in Chicago, in Houston, in North Dakota, who are not receiving support from a church, from a population that says they hear their cries, who says they want to repent? What about the future for Ammar, for people in their situation in Syria, in Jordan, in Egypt, and Lebanon? When we remain in the death, in that grieving, in that anger, in that rage, and we don't come out into those relationships of life. What about the future for people like Shidla, whose people are being wiped out in Iraq, whose country is in tatters, will take generations to rebuild? What's the future for them if we remain in that place of death, of anger, of rage, of desperation at what has happened, and keep ourselves from moving into that place of life, of building relationships? Friends, I think that is what we are called into as Christians, as people who care about the future. I think we're called to acknowledge, to decry, to condemn the works of the God of death that surround us, but to come out of what is dead and into living relationships of peace building, of healing, of hope, of saying we will not, to these children, to the people of Iraq, we will not abandon you, even if our government, our society, the people around us are doing that. Bruggen says that there are really two kinds of consciousness that motivate a people. One of them he calls the royal consciousness, or the imperial consciousness. And he says that primarily that consciousness is characterized by forgetting. We forget our relationship with God, we forget our tradition, we forget what has happened, we forget the stories we share, we forget our relationship with one another, we forget what has been done. And that makes empire possible, friends. That is what allows the next story to be told. The story of Afghanistan, the story of the invasion of Pakistan, the story of the invasion of Iran, all of these things. That's what makes that possible. And he contrasts that with what he calls the prophetic consciousness. And at its heart, the prophetic consciousness is characterized by remembering. By remembering our relationship with God, by remembering our relationship with the people of Iraq in this time, of saying we will not abandon that. That relationship cannot be fulfilled through military means, but there is a relationship, whether we acknowledge Iraq, whether we acknowledge it with the people of Iraq. There's a Quaker song. It's not limited to Quakers. It's called The Lord of the Dance. Maybe some have heard it. Story of Jesus' life. The fourth verse, I think, ends with, they left him there on the cross to die. There was a gathering of Quakers from all around in England last week. I came back from the Middle East and I went to that gathering of Quakers. And there was a point where we were singing that song and there was a picture of time. And so we stopped at that verse. The next verse talks about the resurrection. Somebody shouted out, "We can't leave Jesus on the cross." Friends, when we think about Iran, when we think about our relationship, we can't leave Jesus on the cross because our message as a people is not about crucifixion. It's about resurrection. Last year, I had the opportunity to participate in a worship service through the Christian Peace Witness for Iraq, and the preacher at that worship service was a man named Michael Battle. He's an Episcopal priest who was ordained by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And this was his message. He told a story about the people, about a group of priests, a group of ministers, who were meeting with a Zen Roshi, a Zen teacher. And the Zen teacher asked for copies of the Bible so he could understand what this Christianity thing was about in Japanese. And he went into the study and he read it. He read the whole thing, the Gospels. And he came out and he said, okay, I got to the resurrection part. Now I understand. And he said, I'm going to give each of you a koan, one of these riddles that you have to contemplate for your spiritual development. He gave them a koan. And the koan that he gave them was, this Christianity thing makes no sense without the resurrection. Your koan is, show me the resurrection. And I think that's our invitation, friends. In this time, while all around us the people are giving in to the royal consciousness of forgetting, of turning away, of saying the pain is too much, we have to talk about the resurrection. But more than talk about it, we have to accept the invitation to participate in it. So together, friends, show us the resurrection. In our relationship with the people of Iraq, let us come out of the works of death, and let us read